Welcome to the October 28th Glendale Housing Authority meeting being called to order at 3:07 p.m. May I have your roll call, Ms. City
Authority
Clerk?
members: Devine.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Sinanian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Najarian. Vice Chair Parazian.
Here. May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the October 28, 2014 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, October 23, 2014 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What is next, please?
Approval of minutes.
So moved. Second.
And is there is there oral communications?
None. No cards were submitted.
Okay. And what is next, please?
Business agenda 6A is Director of Community Services and Parks regarding 2014 Homeless Continuum of Care funding application to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. 6A1 is motion authorizing to submit an application and executing necessary documents.
Okay, I see I have a card. Natalie Kamura from Ascensia.
Madam Chair, would you like us to give a brief staff report
Okay.
in anticipation of the comments?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Vice Chair Papazian, members of the Glendale Housing Authority. This is our annual Homeless Continuum of Care funding application to HUD, so you all should be familiar with the program. We have been applying for and receiving these Continuum of Care funds since 1996, in which time the city has received over $30.2 million in homeless funding. The city of Glendale does remain one of only 3 cities in the county of Los Angeles that operates its own homeless continuum of care and is eligible to receive funds directly from HUD. The other 2 cities are Long Beach and Pasadena, so we still hold that distinction. Everyone else that applies for HUD funds for homeless programs has to go through the through LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. The fundamental components of a continuum of care, as you will remember, is 1, coordination of services, homeless prevention, an entry point to service, including intake assessment, case management, and referrals. It includes emergency shelters and transitional housing. Then you graduate to permanent housing or permanent supportive housing, and then rapid rehousing, which is short-term emergency rental assistance for typically new homeless that actually have means if they can only get short-time assistance. So those are the components of what we mean by continuum of care. In Glendale's continuum of care, annually, we do serve approximately 2,097 unduplicated persons through our programs and primarily by the good work of Ascensia, the Salvation Army, Path Ventures, Door of Hope, and the city of Glendale. In terms of Glendale's homeless count, to be able to receive funds directly from HUD, the city is required to conduct at least a biannual point-in-time count as part of the city's needs assessment. And to conduct the count, we do follow a standard methodology that's prescribed by HUD by all continuums across the country. Based on our 2013 homeless count on any given night in Glendale, there are 320 sheltered and unsheltered homeless persons. And that's pretty consistent with the count that, or the numbers that we've seen over the last 15 or 16 years. It typically hovers around 323, 340. Under the HERTH Act, which is the legislation that governs the homeless continuum of care, this year the Glendale Homeless Coalition, which is the term they're probably most familiar with, was reformatted and renamed the Continuum of Care Committee. And per HUD regulations, the committee established and elected a formal board of directors consisting of 8 members. And then they elected a chair of the board, which is Michelle Roberts, executive director of the YWCA, and the vice chair, which is our own Lieutenant John Gilkerson. And then, like the Homeless Coalition, the Continuum of Care Committee is comprised of many of the nonprofits in Glendale and our network of service providers, other government or public agencies such as the school district, the Department of Public Social Services, the Social Security Administration, business representatives, the congregations are members of the Continuum of Care Committee, and formerly homeless persons. So that's the makeup of the Continuum of Care Committee. The board, the executive board, or board of directors is charged with identifying program and funding priorities on behalf of the committee and making sure that those priorities are aligned with HUD's national priorities. And then their job is to evaluate and rank and prioritize funding applications that are submitted by service providers that become part of the consolidated funding application that we submit to HUD. So in terms of the program priorities that have been identified, they include permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, a homeless management information system, and supportive services only programs. Those are the priorities identified. In terms of the process for developing the annual funding plan, which is Exhibit 1 to your report, the city does issue a request for proposal to the existing recipients of the homeless funding, the existing service providers. Those funding applications are reviewed and evaluated by the committee's board of directors. The board conducts interviews and ranks and prioritizes proposals based on compatibility with HUD's mandated priorities. Those funding recommendations are submitted to the committee for approval and then submission to the Housing Authority. Under the Notice of Funding Availability, HUD allows continuums to apply for their annual renewal demand, which is the maximum amount the city can receive if all of its existing funding projects were refunded. However, and that amount would total $2,295,000. However, HUD has required a 2% funding cut, which equates to a $45,903 reduction. So our revised annual renewal demand amount is $2,249,000, which again you will see reflected in Exhibit 1. Then HUD requires that all applications be divided into 3 categories: Tier 1 projects, Tier 2 projects, and a bonus funding category. All of our Tier 1 projects are the city's highest priorities. They all represent the projects that we are requesting to be refunded. Therefore, the board recommended continued funding for all 11 existing projects and all of the existing service providers at their current funding levels, with one exception, and that was to recommend that the Essentia Supportive Services Only project absorb that $45,000 reduction that HUD is requiring. So that would reduce Essentia's grant from $666,000 to $620,000. So the board felt that that project, more than others, could absorb the reduction, and supportive services only projects are HUD's lowest priority for funding. Other than that, it's exactly the same as the current year. Then under Tier 2, the city will apply for a $45,000 permanent supportive housing voucher project to serve 3 chronically homeless individuals, which will be operated by a subrecipient or by a service provider. Then in addition, the city will apply for a new planning project in the amount of $28,000 to assist in paying for staffing to develop the annual plan. So under Tier 2, our total funding request is $74,593. Then under the new bonus funding category, the city will apply for $344,000 for a new Glendale Housing First project to serve up to 15 chronically homeless individuals with scattered site permanent supportive housing with intensive case management and linkages to mainstream services. The application is due to HUD on October 30th, on Thursday. Therefore, the Community Services and Parks Department respectfully requests that the Housing Authority approve the proposed consolidated funding application and priorities as vetted and proposed by the Continuum of Care Committee and its Board of Directors. We do have some representatives of the committee and representing the service providers if you have questions directly to them. We also have some Samvalian, or Homeless Services Coordinator, if you'd like a more detailed slide presentation on the application.
Do you have any questions?
I have a question. Can you explain, this is my first experience with this, the planning project on Tier 2, and you mentioned that the funds will go for staff. Am I correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. It'll help to pay for staff that develops the annual plan.
Okay. And the Glendale Housing First, you say it's 15 individuals will be helped in scattered sites.
Correct.
Can you explain that?
The way that works is we will lease apartment units on, we meaning a nonprofit service provider will lease individual apartment units that it will sublease to homeless clients. And they will pay 30% of their income towards rent, and all the while they will be receiving intensive case management to other services. You want to expand on that?
Good afternoon, Housing Authority, Paula Devine, Vice Chair Papazian, and members of the Housing Authority. The Housing First project is a brand new project. It's proposed to serve 15 chronically homeless individuals. The budget is set to provide actual rental subsidies directly to the landlords on behalf of the clients on a monthly basis permanently. In addition to that, the clients are responsible to pay 30% of their gross income towards rent. So if a unit costs $1,000, the subrecipient will pay about $700 and the client will pay $300 depending on the client's income. In the budget, we are allowed to apply for 30% of supportive services, which would be a case manager, one full-time case manager assigned to working with the 15 chronically homeless individuals. And that entails with connecting the clients to mainstream benefits, getting them access to income, access to employment services, healthcare, and other special needs like mental health assistance or substance abuse assistance, and to continue mediation between the landlord and the tenant to ensure that the tenant remains in housing permanently. And so the 15 individuals will be unsheltered, chronically homeless, from streets to housing, and the case managers will work with the tenants on an ongoing basis. And this is a new project that the city is requesting for HUD for funding, and we're hopeful that we will get the funds and be able to serve new chronically homeless individuals.
Excellent. How long, did you mention, how long will they be entitled to this rent?
The subsidy is permanent subsidy as long as clients are participating in case management and working through becoming self-sufficient and receiving services and accessing different mainstream benefits.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Is it unusual in other agencies or with other groups that are servicing the homeless to have a caseworker who helps them with so many different aspects of their lives beyond just housing? Because you're talking about helping with job placement, correct, with helping them with other sorts of social services. So is it unusual to have a caseworker who kind of guides them through so many different processes?
Housing Authority Friedman, in particular for this Glendale Housing First project, the case manager's role will be the multiple aspect of it. So ongoing case management, mediation, to get the clients accessing to receive services.
My question, though, is that unusual? If I went to Los Angeles, would their homeless services function the same way, or San Bernardino, or other parts of LA County?
I'd like to say that Glendale is unique in providing homeless services and that case managers are equipped and trained to provide services all across. However, we have partnership with a lot of nonprofit agencies, including mental health agencies like D.D. Hirsch or Department of Public Services and or Substance Abuse Clinic, where we're able to connect the client to receive those actual services.
Jess, can you answer the question? Because I've asked it now a few times, and I'm getting good information, but it's not the answer to the question.
The wraparound services that we provide to clients really are the hallmark of a high-functioning program, continuum of care. So to the extent that we have that breadth of services that you're referring to, will you find that in other places? You'll find it in high-performing places. Certainly, and to the extent that there are even more services than those that we provide, we are constantly looking at other programs and trying to emulate the good behaviors and not emulate the ones that are proven to be ineffective.
So I guess at some point I'd like to know, it doesn't have to be publicly, but maybe someone can let me know how common if this is the way it's kind of commonly done, or whether, because it sounds very intensive to me. It sounds, like a great way of delivering many services that these individuals need. And I'm just curious as to whether this is just par for the course now and what every agency is doing, or whether we're kind of doing a little bit beyond, or whether we're in a small group that does this or a very large group that does this. I'm just curious.
We will get you that. We are definitely on the leading edge, but again, we're looking at other folks that have proven levels of service and we keep calling wraparound services to make sure that they're receiving that intensive case management that Yvette's referring to. So I would like to think that we are right there at the very forefront, but we will get you that as we continue to evaluate.
I guess my question kind of goes to some of these folks. Some of them are kind of here all the time permanently, but some aren't. Some come from other places, or they're living in other places and back and forth. Are they getting the same service if they're in Burbank, if they're in Santa Clarita? I just kind of like to know geographically where they'd be getting something similar and where they wouldn't.
Depends more on their needs, so we will get a better comparative, and we do from the other agencies that are out there. And so as we talk to Santa Monica, as we talk to Long Beach, we talk to Pasadena, LA, LASA, we are doing those best management practices, what's working for you, and share that information.
You'll let me know which ones
Most
are.
definitely.
Okay, great, thank you.
If I may make a general comment, Housing Authority Member Friedman, the current trend with permanent supportive housing is intensive case management. It's very personalized, intensive case management with a lot of follow-up. These individuals are tentative at best, so there's a lot of mediation between the landlords and the tenants to keep them in the units and preventing them from falling out. So with permanent supportive housing, I would say the current trend is that most communities that operate permanent supportive housing will have intensive case management attached to it.
Great,
it has to be a...
And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear when I asked the question.
No, I think certainly you were, and to the extent that it's a good business question. If somebody falls, well, why do we have this degree? Why is the safety net in some of these in these cases so heavily intertwined and woven, right? Because it sounds like a lot. The idea from a business perspective is that if somebody falls through those cracks again, it's much more expensive and time-consuming to go grab them and bring them back to where you had them. It actually is much more economical once they're in service to make sure that they don't fall out of service.
Well, exactly. I'm not an expert in this the way that you all are, but it seems to me that that just providing the housing is probably not enough for a lot of these people, that you have to also provide the job training, you have to provide substance abuse counseling, in some cases, many different things. And I'm really gratified to hear that we are tackling it, and the committee is tackling it from all angles. And I see representatives from our nonprofits here, so I know that they're involved in a lot of those areas. So I'm really, really happy to hear that we are taking this approach. So thanks.
In the years I've been on the Housing Authority, it's very serious with the Housing Authority as far as our people that are homeless. And one of the big things is the organization of these groups of people and how they are interviewed, followed up. It's not here's one, here's another. Everything is done so that and every year it gets better and better as far as the control that they have. And it's always been interesting to watch this.
I have a question, Mr. Duran. So we have 320 sheltered and unsheltered homeless persons. according to this year's January report. And I'm trying to sort of get some context. So we appear to have about 50 short-term shelters. I don't know if that's the proper word, but 50 beds or 50 spots for these individuals. For most of it seems to be transitional, so it's not long-term. So all these services that we're providing, is it to homeless people, or is it people that we're trying to prevent from becoming homeless? Is it people that we're sort of graduating out of the homeless program, homelessness status to a better place in life? So I'm trying to understand this 320. Is this a constant? Is this does this vacillate? This number goes up and down every month? How does this work?
Housing Authority member Sinanian, it is what is referred to as a point-in-time count. So we pick one night a year, and it's typically during the third week of January, and all the continuums across country do the same thing, because it's a very specific methodology that we all follow in order for everything to be fair and everybody's needs assessments to be consistent in order for HUD to determine how much funding should be allocated to each continuum of care. So it's very structured, and it's again, on any given night we will have 320 individuals in Glendale, whether they are in homeless shelters receiving services or literally sleeping out on the streets. So this count includes persons in the shelter operated by Door of Hope, for example, in the existing scattered site units operated by Path Ventures or Essentia or in the shelter. So it includes all of them as well. So it's not literally 320 persons in the street, but it's also persons in shelters. Again, because they are still in very tentative situations and could fall out next week. And if the point-in-time count was held that day as well, they'd be counted twice. So it's literally a point-in-time count. On that night, a snapshot. On that night, that's how many persons were homeless in Glendale.
Interesting.
Any more questions?
Well, I just want to thank you for everything that our city does, our staff does, your department does in particular, because of my long experience on CDBG. I know how much care and how much attention goes towards these projects, and appropriately so. And it's only thanks to our high performance that we continue being funded by the HUD, and the funding is never enough. So I know you guys jointly with all the organizations that are present in Glendale do a really good job. So I want to commend you all on that.
I have a question. Okay. I will echo Mr. Mayor for your job you're doing, and thank you for the report. It's well done. And I have a question. So how many in total shelters, including those 2 year-round shelters, including those 2?
I'm going to call on Ms. Samvelian to answer that question.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Papazian, members of the Housing Authority, the City of Glendale has 2 year-round shelters. One is operated by YWCA of Glendale for victims of domestic violence survivors, and that's 10 bed for 45 days. And so clients would graduate from that program. The second year-round shelter is operated through Essentia. It's 40 bed for individuals and families. And the stay for that shelter is 60 to 90 days per participant. We do have a seasonal program that's operated through the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority Winter Shelter Program that comes to Glendale during the winter shelter season and serves about 80 unduplicated persons.
How about Door of Hope?
The Door of Hope is a transitional housing program. The length of stay for the participants is up to 1 year. We serve 13 families, single women with their children, any point in time. Throughout the year, they serve about 70 persons that graduate to permanent, unsubsidized permanent housing. Then we have Salvation Army, who's part of this application, that provides permanent subsidized housing for 4 chronically homeless families with a substance abuse recovery, and that's permanent as long as they qualify, they stay, and they have high success rate of getting families out to independent living or even purchasing a home. And then part of the application, we have the city's Shelter Plus Care vouchers, which is permanent supportive housing. The city operates about a 90 unit for chronically homeless individuals and families throughout the city of Glendale, and that the turnover for that is on occasions when people graduate or they've completed the time for the program. And then the two projects will be two new additions, the 15 units and the 3 units for our inventory for upcoming fiscal year 15-16.
And what's the benchmark for being chronically homeless?
The HUD defines chronically homeless as being homeless on the street for more than a year or have had 3 episodes in the last 4 years. And an adult member has to have a special need with substance abuse, mental health, veteran status, or other physical or disabled developmental disabilities.
Thank you.
If there is no other...
We have a speaking card.
Huh?
We have a speaker.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So Natalie Kimura from Essentia, 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. I'm Natalie Kimura with Essentia. Essentia does operate the Access Center and then 2 permanent supportive housing programs that are in this application. We are absorbing a $45,000 cut, which is in addition to a $100,000 cut from last year. With that, I'm still grateful we're in the priority list because the HUD priorities have been strongly in favor of permanent supportive housing. The problem is, as you noted, housing doesn't really work too well if there aren't the supportive services attached. The things that we do are critically important to keeping people housed. To answer your question, the type of services that we will provide is weekly home visits to check on the wellness of the client, follow-up phone calls, assessment of any kind of presenting needs. These are people who have at least one disability, frequently more, usually chronic health problems. So we're connected with health providers, we're connected with their mental health care provider, we make sure they're taking their medication. If they have hoarding tendencies, we have to work with that. Depends on every different household, they have different needs. And so the case managers are really adept. If they don't have that personal resource to counsel people, they will connect them to the right resource that will. The other thing that I do want to point out is for the permanent supportive housing programs for chronically homeless adults, we now need to be using a unified assessment tool. So Essentia, operating as the coordinated entry system for the continuum of care of Glendale, is implementing what's called a VI SPDAT. What that does is it gives us an index of each person we interview, and so they're going to be ranked according to their vulnerability. So the people moving into these housing programs will be the most vulnerable people in our community. The reality is many of those people won't be employable. In fact, many of them will be near death. So the reality and expectation around this, I think, should be measured around what does sustainability mean for this population. We're really looking at a wellness model, stabilizing their health, and hoping that they can improve their health to the point, if they could, to be employable. That would be fantastic. But the reality is, for many of these clients, this will be their last home. So I hate to be grim about it, but that's sort of the reality. But the real reason I wanted to talk to you today, and for your audience to understand, is that this funding is awarded on a competitive basis. And we would not be getting that if the City of Glendale did not provide the leadership and the planning work to make it happen. The planning line item in there, I can tell you, because I used to do this, is woefully inadequate. But at least it's better than nothing. The work that your staff has to do to meet the HUD guidelines for this application are tremendous. This application itself came in with a very aggressive deadline. And I just have to say they were phenomenal. I was getting emails at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were flexible with us to the point that they could be demanding because they had to be. But we really, it's not just me, I'm speaking on behalf of Tim and Rick and other providers here in the room. We're really, really grateful because over $2 million this year will be coming into our system. And it wouldn't happen if we applied individually. We had to come in through this continuum. And so I want to thank the City of Glendale for continuing to invest in this. It's costing you some money, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Questions or comments?
Anything else? If not, I'd like to move 6A1.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any authority member or... Oh, I'm sorry. May we have a take roll call, please?
Authority members Devine,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Mincy,
Yes?
Tinanian,
Yes?
Weaver,
Aye.
Chair Najarian, Vice Chair Parazian.
Yes. So what is next?
Authority
to-
members, staff comments?
Is there any new business agenda?
We adjourn. Is there a second?
Seconds.